He led the Denver Nuggets to 9 straight playoff appearances. He's the all-time leading scorer in franchise history at 26 points a game. It was not the shooters league it is now. What would Alex English have done now? 15 years, 8 straight All-Star appearances. And what's interesting is, much like Jokić, he was a second-round pick as well. So he didn't come in as a top pick, a flashy player. He didn't have a flashy game. So I've said before, he's the most overlooked player in league history. He led the 80s in scoring. You don't seem like a bitter guy. I'm talking to you during the break. Have you ever thought to yourself once, hey, pay attention to me. I led the league in scoring for a decade.
You know, I would love to be able to say that, but you would think that people that know the game, basketball aficionados, they would know that. And when they do all this voting, they would look at the records. But, you know, I played during an era when there wasn't television. You know, there wasn't the internet. So it was word of mouth and people getting a game every now and then. ESPN came and they got to see more of our games.
Yeah. So you look at what has happened to the game, Alex. Hall of Fame forward Alex English, it's gotten very global. The European players initially were more finesse, highly skilled. They've gotten more physical. The knock on them for years is they weren't physical, they were skilled. I think our domestic players have gotten more skilled. They've gotten more physical. But what do you make of Jokić and the international part of the game? Could you have predicted that? Because when you were in the league, it was a domestic product. Are you surprised the popularity of it and how many great international players, Alex, there are?
Well, I'm not surprised. You know, there's you got to look at all the other countries that play basketball, and there's got to be at least 1 or 2 elite players in that country. And as you've seen over the years, you know, there's been 2 or 3. I know when I played my last year, we played against Tony Kukoc and his team in the first McDonald's European game against an American team. And it was, you know, they were pretty good. They were a pretty good squad. I think 3 or 4 of those guys came over to play in the NBA. But there were a few guys that played that came from overseas. But now you see the elite players from different countries. They are coming and they're standing out. You gotta look at Djokovic, Antetokounmpo, and Doncic. You know, there's just so many great players. Even though they're probably the elite for their country, but when you come to the NBA and you're one player, you can be very exceptional on a squad.
Could Jokić and his style have fit in your era?
Oh man, I would have loved to play with Jokić. You know, the way he sees the game. In fact, I think that the Denver Nuggets today are very similar to the way we played. They play off of they don't just play plays. They play off of passes. You know, where the ball is and cuts. And Jokić is just so good at making you pay for making mistakes. You know, he's a big guy. I call him point center.
Yeah.
He can handle the ball. He brings the ball up the floor. He makes threes. He makes his team better. Every player on the floor is better because Jokić sees the game the way he does. And, you know, that's the kind of player that you select as an MVP, someone that makes the other players around him better. And Jokić has done that his whole career.
You know, the advantage to having his personality where he's not from the country, he's not on our social media. I mean, I guess it's available for everybody. The advantage is this league can be very distracting to young players. All the money, all the shoes, all the commercial, all the branding. And your team in Denver didn't get the publicity, so you were a very focused team for over a decade. Tim Duncan, not a wildly dynamic player, a great player. I look at Denver and I think, outside of Jamal Murray, it's not a flashy team, and I actually think that's an advantage. They won't have the egos of a Kobe Shaq dynasty, right? Like, when you were in Denver, it's a football town. It's not really right. I mean, I kind of look at Denver and I'm like, oh, this is the Spurs. I mean, go back to...
It was John Elway's city.
Oh, it was?
It was John Elway's city. The Denver Broncos, they were a good squad. I think they even went to the Super Bowl that year, one of those years. But, you know, the Denver Nuggets, we were just a team that played basketball. We played a different brand. We played the brand. We played the brand that they play now.
Yeah.
They push the ball up the floor. They move the ball on offense. There are a lot of cuts, and you play off of where the pass goes. And that's how we played. That's the way the Denver Nuggets play now. And when you play reads, you can't really guard a person because they have the liberty to go wherever they need to go based on the pass.
Yeah.
And based on who's got the ball.
Yeah. It's interesting in the Michael LeBron debate. I always think LeBron's a little more like Magic. Kobe is a little more like Michael. He's a more attacking player. But there is this feeling. People always say, well, if LeBron played in the old days with the hand check, and I'm like, listen, good is good is good. Like who? Go back.
He would still be great. he would still be great. You've got to admire what he's done, how he's played the game all these years. I can remember when I was 35, 36 in my 15th year, it was a struggle to go out and produce like you produce when you're younger. And, with the exception of maybe a step or two slower, he's still producing and still a pretty solid basketball player.
Yeah. You played for 2 years under Don Nelson. Don Nelson is a guy that was kind of known as a little ahead of his time. Now he's, I think, in the cannabis business in Hawaii. But what was Don
like?
Good for him. Good for him is right. Very good for him. What was it like to play under Don?
It was similar to Doug Moe. He had a lot more structure in his offense. And, he was the first coach that gave me the opportunity to play. And he saw that, that I was a pretty decent player, because that second year I was there, I almost got cut.
Wow.
But he and Wayne Embry saw something in me and said, okay, we're going to keep this player. They kept me, and, it was a great career for me. But he was a lot like Doug Moe in that he went with the flow of the offense. Expected you to play defense, but he had a flow where you pass the ball and you go, you read where the ball went, and everybody cut after that.
It's interesting. You played with Fat Lever and Dan Issel, very offensive-minded guys, and sometimes it's hard to share the ball. But Doug Moe wanted points and pace, so it wasn't that hard. But when I watch Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're both wings. And I say, the Heatles, LeBron and D-Wade were not a perfect fit, but they were so darn good, they just burrowed their way to championships. When I watch Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I'm like, they're not perfect. I wish one was a true point. Are they good? Yeah. Are they good enough to just burrow through it and win championships? If Boston this year, like the 6th year of these guys, they get beat by Miami, would you... Alex, you know this game. Would you keep going for it, or would you say to yourself, guys, this tandem doesn't quite work?
Well, I would. I think you have to give them an opportunity, and sometimes it's not just those star players. It's the other players around them as well. They've got to contribute as well. And you look at the Denver Nuggets team, you've got Jokić and Murray who produce a lot of the points, but they are not the ones that make the team the way it is.
Right.
It's those other guys around them. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, great outside shooter. Gordon, just strong, going to the basket, a defender. And then the guys coming off the bench. They're solid. They've just got a strong squad and a lot of players that play around those guys that make them the team that they are. And I think the coach doesn't put pressure on them to say, okay, Jokić has got to score, or Murray's got to score. Whoever's got the ball in the position to score, they score, with the ideal and understanding that those two guys are your main guys. But those other guys around them, I mean, any night with the Nuggets, it could be anybody's night. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope last game hit some big threes.
Yeah.
Michael Porter Jr., great shots from the outside. Gordon, inside, playing tough defense. It was all those other guys that made that team, make that team the best that it is. And, it's not just Jokić. Jokić is great and should have been MVP this year. But you got to look at Murray, man. He's a true superstar.
Yeah. Alex English joining us, Hall of Fame forward, who I've talked about multiple times on this show. So Jimmy Butler's a fascinating player. his average goes up significantly in the playoffs. All right. He's one of those guys that he doesn't quite get the credit. His game isn't smooth. You had a smooth game.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys, I mean, Kyrie Irving's game, he rolls out of bed and can hit a jumper, right? Some guys are smooth, Kobe Bryant. And then there's guys like Jimmy Butler who just compete their butt off, and you look up and they got 34. Go back to your years. A guy that wasn't pretty. It wasn't fluid. And you just couldn't stop him, Alex. You look up and you hated playing. You know, Dominique Wilkins once told me he never minded facing MJ. He hated facing Bernard King. He goes, I couldn't sleep for
So did I.
So is that
Bernard King? Bernard King was just rough. He was only 6'5", 6'6", but when he played very rugged. Like, you know, when he was on the break, if you didn't get out of his way, he would run over you. And he was just a tough guard. One of the toughest guys. Another guy, Marcus Johnson, another one of those players that played tough basketball, would get to the hole, could shoot the outside jump shot. During my era, it was the era of the small forward. So every night I played, there was somebody on the other side that was going to give you numbers, or they're going to guard you defensively. I mean, Dennis Rodman, James Worthy, Purvis Short. There were a lot of guys, Mike Mitchell. So there were a lot of guys every night that came out to play and that would give you numbers at that position. But, you know, there's some of those guys that play hard every night. Fat Lever, you know, one of my teammates, he was one of those guys that you just you didn't really pay attention until the end of the game, and you see he's got a triple-double.
Yeah. If you played today, have you ever looked and thought, man, I was born too early?
I can't do that. I cannot do that because it would mess with my head. You know, the amount of money that these guys get paid for what they do.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. I congratulate them, and I hope they make all the money that they can make. But the game of basketball has progressed, and, you know, it's an international game, and it's probably the best watch sports-wise out there for the year. So, I don't go there. I don't think about what if I was playing today. I know my game would probably have to have been different because, you know, there are a lot of guys that played like I played with mid-range game.
Yeah.
They have to shoot outside jump shots now. They've forgotten the mid-range game.
Yeah. By the way, if I drove the lane and kicked it out to you, could you still hit a 17-footer?
Well, I think so. You never forget that.
Alex English, what a pleasure. Great talking to you. Great meeting you for the first time. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, and we'll see you at the championship parade.
All right, there you go, right there. He's calling it, baby. Nuggets championship parade in the Lodo district. That was fun for me. I watching that old video of Alex English. He was a bucket, man. That guy was a bucket.
He could get some buckets, yeah.
Yeah.
Real, just smooth players. Silky smooth.
And
made
long,
it look effortless.
Always shot the ball up here. He was long.
I was never a single-digit guy as like a jersey number.
I love
but he
him.
had just the number 2. It was like, okay, that looks cool.
Jeter, too. I like single
Jeter,
digit.
too, as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if we had jerseys on this show, what number would you be?
Number 1. That was obnoxious.
No ego whatsoever. Love it. Love it.
That was obnoxious. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.